The bathroom door was locked. Outside, gunfire echoed through the hallways of Oxford High School. Inside, a 15-year-old girl texted her mum, "I love you." It was November 30th, year 2021. 4 students would be dead within minutes. The shooter, a 15-year-old boy, whose parents had bought him the gun just days earlier. What happens when parents don't just fail their children, but actively create monsters? This is the story of 10 killers shaped by the very people who were supposed to protect them. Where are you watching from? Drop your location below. I want to know who's brave enough to sit through these cases with me. Case 1. Ethan Crumbley, year 2021. November 26th, year 2021. Black Friday. While families across America were hunting for deals, James and Jennifer Crumbley walked into a gun store in Oxford, Michigan, with their 15-year-old son, Ethan. They weren't there for a TV or a gaming console. They were there to buy a 9mm Sig Sauer handgun. Jennifer posted about it on social media the same day, calling it Ethan's new beauty. She wrote, "Mom and son day testing out his new Christmas present." 4 days later, that gun would be used to murder 4 students and wound 7 others at Oxford High School. But the warning signs didn't start on Black Friday. They'd been flashing for months. Ethan had been searching online for ammunition during class. He'd been looking up violent content. His teachers noticed. His behavior was erratic. He was drawing disturbing images, torture, shootings, blood. On the morning of November 30th, year 2021, a teacher found a note on Ethan's desk. It showed a handgun, a bullet, a person bleeding out. The words scrawled across the page read, "The thoughts won't stop. Help me. Blood everywhere. My life is useless." The school called his parents in immediately. James and Jennifer Crumbley sat across from counselors and administrators at 11:30 in the morning. They were shown the drawing. They were told their son needed help now. The school urged them to take Ethan home, to get him into counseling within 48 hours. Jennifer Crumbley laughed it off. She said Ethan was just expressing himself through art. James didn't even ask his son if he was okay. Neither parent mentioned that they'd just bought him a gun. Neither parent checked their car to see if the weapon was still there. It wasn't. Ethan had it in his backpack. The Crumbleys left the school. They went back to work. Ethan went back to class. At 12:51 in the afternoon, he walked into a bathroom, loaded the Sig Sauer, and came out firing. Tate Meyer, 16, was shot in the hallway. He died in a patrol car on the way to the hospital. Hannah Street Juliana, 14, was killed near a classroom. Madison Baldwin, 17, was shot in the neck. Justin Schilling, 17, died 2 days later from his injuries. 7 others were wounded, including a teacher who was shot in the shoulder while trying to protect students. Ethan fired 30 rounds in under 5 minutes. When deputies arrived, he was standing in the hallway with his hands up. The gun was on the floor. He didn't run. He didn't resist. He told them, "I am the shooter." While police were securing the scene, Jennifer Crumbley was texting her son, "Ethan, don't do it." James Crumbley called 911 to report that a gun was missing from their home and that he believed his son might be the shooter. But by then, it was already over. The investigation revealed a digital trail that painted a horrifying picture. Ethan had texted his mother weeks earlier, telling her he thought there were demons in the house. She didn't respond. He told her he was hearing voices. She told him to suck it up and stop being dramatic. On the night before the shooting, James Crumbley came home to find Ethan searching for ammunition on his phone. Instead of taking the gun away, James told him not to get caught. The Crumbleys were arrested on December 3rd, year 2021, after a manhunt found them hiding in a Detroit warehouse. They were charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 1 for each student killed. Prosecutors argued that the parents had not only ignored red flags, but had provided the weapon and created the conditions for the massacre. It was the first time in American history that parents of a school shooter were charged with manslaughter for their child's crimes. Jennifer Crumbley's trial began in January year 2024. The jury heard text messages, saw the drawings, watched her dismiss every warning. On February 6, 2024, she was found guilty on all 4 counts. James Crumbley's trial followed in March. He was convicted on April 9, 2024. Both were sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. Ethan Crumbley pleaded guilty to all 24 charges, including 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of terrorism. On December 8, 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will never walk free. But the damage is permanent. 4 families will never see their children graduate. 7 survivors carry physical and emotional scars. And an entire community was shattered because 2 parents chose negligence over responsibility. The Crumbleys didn't pull the trigger, but they loaded the gun, ignored the warnings, and sent their son back into a school where he'd just drawn a picture of exactly what he was about to do. Case Coxie, Kenneth Kimes Jr. Kenneth Kimes Jr. never had a chance at a normal life. He was born into a criminal empire run by his mother, Sante Kimes, a woman so manipulative, so ruthless, that she trained her son to lie, steal, and kill before he was old enough to drive. By the time Kenneth was in his 20s, he wasn't just complicit in his mother's crimes. He was her partner. And together, they committed one of the most cold-blooded murders in New York City history. Sante Kimes was a con artist, a fraudster, and a sociopath. Born Sante Singwas in year 1934, she spent her life running scams, insurance fraud, arson, slavery, theft. She married millionaire Kenneth Kimes Sr. in year 1971, and for years, the couple lived a life of luxury funded by crime. But Sante wasn't satisfied. She wanted more. And when her husband died in year 1994, she turned her attention to her son. Kenneth Jr. was raised in chaos. Sante homeschooled him, not to protect him, but to control him. She taught him how to forge documents, how to manipulate people, how to steal without getting caught. She kept him isolated from the outside world, molding him into the perfect accomplice. By his late teens, Kenneth was helping his mother run scams across the country. They posed as wealthy buyers to defraud real estate agents. They enslaved undocumented workers in their homes. They set fires to collect insurance money. And in year 1998, they set their sights on a wealthy widow in Manhattan. Irene Silverman was 82 years old. She owned a 5-story mansion on East 65th Street in New York City, worth millions. Sante wanted it. In May year 1998, she and Kenneth moved into the mansion as tenants, using fake names and fake references. Irene didn't trust them. She told friends that something was off about the mother and son. She had her staff install hidden cameras to monitor them. She was planning to evict them. On July 5, year 1998, Irene Silverman disappeared. She was last seen in the hallway of her own home. Her body has never been found. But investigators didn't need a body to know what happened. Sante and Kenneth had been sloppy. They left behind a trail of evidence, forged deeds, fake signatures, notebooks, detailing their plan to take over Irene's property. They'd been caught on surveillance footage, entering and leaving the mansion on the day Irene vanished. And when police arrested them on July 5, year 1998, they found Irene's personal documents, her keys, and a stun gun in their possession. The trial was a circus. Sante represented herself and turned the courtroom into a stage. She screamed at the judge. She accused prosecutors of framing her. She claimed she was a victim of a conspiracy. Kenneth sat silently beside her, emotionless. In year 2000, both were convicted of murder, robbery, and conspiracy. They were sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the story didn't end there. In year 2004, Kenneth admitted to another murder, that of businessman David Kasdan, in year 1998. A man Sante had scammed, and Kenneth had shot in the back of the head in Los Angeles. Kenneth was sentenced to an additional 120 years. Sante Kimes died in prison on May 19, year 2014. At the age of 79, Kenneth Kimes Jr. remains incarcerated, serving a sentence that will keep him behind bars for the rest of his life. He once tried to escape by digging through a prison wall. He failed. Kenneth Kimes Jr. was not born a killer. He was made into one, by a mother who saw him not as a son, but as a tool. And because of her, 2 people are dead, and a young man will spend the rest of his life paying for crimes his mother taught him to commit. What time is it where you are? Let me know in the comments. Case 3. Lyle, Erik Menendez, year 1989. August 20th, year 1989. Beverly Hills, California. A quiet Sunday night in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in America. Inside a sprawling mansion on Elm Drive, Jose and Kitty Menendez were watching television in their den. At 10:16 in the evening, their 2 sons walked into the room carrying shotguns. They fired 16 rounds. Jose was shot point blank in the back of the head. Kitty tried to crawl away. They reloaded and shot her again. And again. When it was over, both parents were unrecognizable. Lyle Menendez was 21. Erik was 18. And for months, they played the role of grieving sons. They called 911 in hysterics. Erik sobbed into the phone. "Someone killed my parents." They told police they'd been out at the movies and came home to find their parents dead. They cried at the funeral. They spent their inheritance, over $1 million in 6 months, on Rolex watches, sports cars, and courtside seats at NBA games. They acted like victims, but they were killers. The truth began to unravel in year 1990, when Erik confessed to his psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel. Erik told him everything: the planning, the shooting, the cover-up. Oziel's girlfriend overheard the session and went to the police. On March 8th, year 1990, Lyle was arrested in Beverly Hills. Erik turned himself in, 3 days later, in Israel, where he'd been hiding. The motive? Money. At least, that's what prosecutors argued. Jose Menendez was a wealthy entertainment executive. Kitty was a former beauty queen. The brothers stood to inherit $14 million. But the defense told a different story. One of years of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. They claimed Jose had molested both boys since childhood. They said Kitty knew and did nothing. They argued the killings were not premeditated murder, but a desperate act of self-defense by 2 young men who believed their parents were going to kill them. The first trial in year 1993 ended in hung juries for both brothers. The second trial in year 1995 was different. The judge limited testimony about abuse. The jury didn't buy the defense. On March 20th, year 1996, Lyle and Erik Menendez were convicted of first-degree murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For decades, they sat in separate prisons, unable to see each other. But in year 2018, they were reunited at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego, and in recent years, their case has been reopened. New evidence has emerged. Letters Erik wrote before the murders describing the abuse. Testimony from a former member of the boy band Menudo, who claims Jose Menendez sexually assaulted him as well. In October year 2024, the Los Angeles District Attorney recommended resentencing. A hearing is scheduled for December year 2024. Whether they were victims or cold-blooded killers is still debated. But one thing is certain: 2 people are dead, and 2 brothers will likely spend the rest of their lives behind bars. If you're still watching, you're part of a small group who can handle the darkest truths. Hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us bring you more untold stories. Case 4, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, year 2013. April 15th, year 2013. Patriots' Day in Boston, Massachusetts. The Boston Marathon, one of the oldest and most celebrated races in the world, was in full swing. Thousands of runners crossed the finish line on Boylston Street. Families cheered, children waved flags. At 2:49 in the afternoon, a pressure cooker bomb exploded near the finish line. 13 seconds later, a second bomb detonated a block away. The blasts tore through the crowd. 3 people were killed instantly. Over 260 were injured. 16 lost limbs. The bombers were brothers, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, 26, and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, 19. And the younger brother had been radicalized by the older. Dzhokhar, known as Dzhokhar to friends, was a popular kid. He was a wrestler at Cambridge Ringe and Latin School. He smoked weed, went to parties, seemed like a normal American teenager. But at home, his older brother, Tamerlan, was filling his head with extremist ideology. Tamerlan had become radicalized after trips to Dagestan and Chechnya. He watched jihadist videos. He believed America was at war with Islam. And he convinced his younger brother to help him build bombs. They used instructions from an Al-Qaeda magazine called Inspire. They filled pressure cookers with nails, ball bearings, and explosives. They planted the bombs in backpacks and left them in the crowd. Then, they walked away. The FBI released surveillance images of the suspects on April 18, 2013. That night, the brothers panicked. They shot and killed MIT police officer Sean Collier, 27, as he sat in his patrol car. They carjacked a Mercedes SUV and told the driver they were the marathon bombers. The driver escaped and called police. A massive manhunt began. At 1 in the morning on April 19, 2013, police cornered the brothers in Watertown, Massachusetts. A shootout erupted. The brothers threw pipe bombs at officers. Tamerlan charged at police and was shot multiple times. Dzhokhar ran him over with the stolen SUV as he fled. Tamerlan died at the scene. Dzhokhar hid in a boat in a backyard. He was found hours later, bleeding and barely conscious. Inside the boat, he'd written a message in pencil. The U.S. government is killing our innocent civilians. I can't stand to see such evil go unpunished. We Muslims are one body. You hurt one, you hurt us all. He was arrested, charged with 30 counts, including use of a weapon of mass destruction and murder. His trial began in 2015. The defense admitted he was guilty but argued he'd been influenced by his older brother. The jury didn't care. On April 8, 2015, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was convicted on all counts. On May 15, 2015, he was sentenced to death. He remains on death row at ADX Florence, a supermax prison in Colorado. His execution has been delayed by appeals. But the victims, the 3 dead, the hundreds injured, the families destroyed, will never get their lives back. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was 19 years old when he planted those bombs. He was a teenager who could have had a future. Instead, he followed his brother into terrorism, and now he'll die in prison. Case 5. Ed Gein, November 16, 1957. Plainfield, Wisconsin. A small farming town where everyone knew everyone. That night, police entered the home of Ed Gein, a 51-year-old handyman who lived alone on a remote farm. What they found inside would become the stuff of nightmares and inspire some of the most terrifying horror films ever made. Hanging from the ceiling in the shed was the decapitated body of Bernice Worden, a local hardware store owner who'd gone missing earlier that day. She'd been gutted like a deer. Inside the house, investigators found human skulls used as bowls, chairs upholstered with human skin, a belt made of nipples, lampshades made from faces, a shoebox full of vulvas, and a woman's suit, a full torso vest made from the skin of a female corpse, complete with breasts. Ed Gein wasn't just a killer. He was a grave robber, a necrophile, and a man so psychologically destroyed by his mother that he tried to become her. Ed was born in 1906 to an abusive, fanatically religious mother named Augusta Gein. She believed all women, except herself, were sinful whores. She isolated Ed and his brother Henry on the farm, forbidding them from making friends or talking to girls. She read them Bible passages about death and damnation every night. When Ed's father died in 1940, Augusta's control over him tightened. When his brother Henry died under suspicious circumstances in 1944, Ed was left alone with her. And when Augusta died of a stroke in 1945, Ed's mind shattered. He sealed off her bedroom and living room, preserving them exactly as she'd left them. He lived in a single room of the house, surrounded by filth and decay. And then, he started digging up graves. Between 1947 and 1957, he exhumed corpses of middle-aged women who resembled his mother. He brought them home. He skinned them. He wore their skin. He danced in their faces under the moonlight. But grave robbing wasn't enough. On December 8th, year 1954, Ed walked into a tavern and shot the owner, Mary Hogan, in the head. He dragged her body out through the snow and took her home. 3 years later, he did it again, this time to Bernice Worden. Ed Gein was arrested on November 16th, year 1957. He confessed to both murders and admitted to robbing graves. He was found mentally incompetent to stand trial and sent to a psychiatric hospital. In year 1968, he was deemed competent, tried, and found not guilty by reason of insanity. He spent the rest of his life in a mental institution. He died of respiratory failure on July 26, year 1984, at the age of 77. But his legacy lived on. Ed Gein inspired Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. He became the blueprint for the modern horror villain, a quiet, unassuming man with a house full of horrors. Ed Gein was not born a monster. He was made into one, by a mother who twisted his mind so completely that he could never escape her, even after she was dead. What's the weather like where you are? Sunny? Rainy? Drop it below. Case 6. Henry Lee Lucas. Year 1983. Henry Lee Lucas claimed he killed over 600 people. He confessed to murders across the country, hitchhikers, drifters, women, children. For years, law enforcement believed him. They closed cold cases based on his word. But the truth was far more complicated. Henry Lee Lucas was a killer, yes, but he was also a liar. And the real horror of his story isn't just the people he murdered, it's how he was created. Henry was born in year 1936 inches, Blacksburg, Virginia, in a one-room cabin with no running water. His mother, Viola, was a prostitute who abused him daily. She beat him with planks of wood. She forced him to watch her have sex with clients. She dressed him in girls' clothing and sent him to school to humiliate him. His father, Anderson Lucas, was an alcoholic who'd lost both legs in a railroad accident. He couldn't protect Henry. No one could. When Henry was 10, Viola hit him in the head with a plank so hard it fractured his skull. He was left with brain damage and blinding headaches for the rest of his life. He started killing animals. He had sex with their corpses. By his teens, he was violent, uncontrollable, and full of rage. On January 11th, year 1960, Henry got into an argument with his mother. She was 74. He was 23. He stabbed her in the neck. She bled out on the floor. He was arrested, convicted of second-degree murder, and sentenced to 20 to 40 years. He was released in year 1970. For the next 13 years, Henry drifted across America with his partner in crime, Otis Toole, a serial killer and arsonist he'd met in year 1976. Together, they claimed to have killed hundreds. Henry confessed to murders in Texas, Florida, California, Michigan. He gave details. He drew maps. Police cleared case after case. But investigators started to notice inconsistencies. Henry confessed to murders that happened while he was in jail. He described crime scenes that didn't match the evidence. He was fed information by detectives desperate to close cases. In year 1985, a journalist named Hugh Ainsworth exposed the truth. Henry Lee Lucas was a serial confessor. He was making it up. A Texas investigation confirmed that Henry had been lying about most of his confessions. He was officially linked to only 3 murders. His mother, Viola, in year 1960. A woman named Kate Rich, in year 1982. And his 15-year-old common-law wife, Frida Becky Powell, in year 1982. He was convicted of 11 murders total, but even that number is disputed. Henry was sentenced to death, but in year 1998, then-Governor George W. Bush commuted his sentence to life in prison, the only time Bush ever granted clemency on death row. Henry Lee Lucas died of heart failure on March 12, year 2001, at the age of 64. Henry Lee Lucas was a killer, but he was also a victim of a mother so cruel, so violent that she destroyed him before he ever had a chance. And because of her, people died. And because of him, dozens of murder cases remain unsolved, tainted by false confessions that law enforcement was too eager to believe. Case 7. Mary Bell, year 1968. Mary Bell was 11 years old when she killed for the second time. She was 10 when she killed for the first. And by the time she was convicted, she'd become the youngest serial killer in British history, a little girl with dead eyes and no remorse. Mary Flora Bell was born on May 26, year 1957, in Newcastle upon Tyne, England. Her mother, Betty Bell, was a prostitute who didn't want her. Betty tried to kill Mary multiple times as a child, pushing her out of windows, feeding her pills, leaving her with strangers. There were rumors that Betty prostituted Mary to clients. Mary grew up unwanted, unloved, and full of rage. On May 25, year 1968, the day before her 11th birthday, Mary strangled 4-year-old Martin Brown in an abandoned house. She left his body on the floor and walked away. The death was initially ruled an accident, but Mary couldn't stay quiet. She and her friend Norma Bell, no relation, broke into a nursery and left notes. "I murder so that I may come back. We did murder Martin Brown." On July 31st, year 1968, Mary killed again. This time, the victim was 3-year-old Brian Howe. She strangled him, then mutilated his body with scissors. She carved an M into his stomach. She cut his hair. She punctured his legs. When police found him, they knew it wasn't an accident. Mary was arrested on August 7th, year 1968. During questioning, she smiled. She showed no emotion. When asked why she killed Brian, she said, "Murder isn't that bad. We all die sometime anyway." Her trial began in December year 1968. She was 11 years old, sitting in a courtroom, accused of 2 murders. The prosecution called her evil. The defense argued she was a victim of her upbringing. The jury found her guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. She was sentenced to detention, at Her Majesty's pleasure, essentially an indefinite sentence. Mary Bell was released in year 1980 at the age of 23. She was given a new identity. She had a daughter. She has lived in anonymity ever since, protected by a court order that bans the press from revealing her location or identity. Mary Bell is still alive today. She is 67 years old. She has never publicly expressed remorse. The families of Martin Brown and Brian Howe have never received justice. And a little girl who killed 2 toddlers walks free, hidden somewhere in the United Kingdom, living under a name no one knows. Mary Bell was not born evil. She was made into a killer by a mother who abused her, neglected her, and destroyed her ability to feel empathy. But 2 little boys are dead, and their families will never forget. These stories aren't easy to hear, but they're real. If you appreciate the deep research we put into every case, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Case 8. Richard Ramirez. Summer, year 1985. Los Angeles, California. A city gripped by terror. A serial killer was breaking into homes in the dead of night, raping, torturing, and murdering victims at random. He left pentagrams drawn in blood. He forced survivors to swear allegiance to Satan. The press called him the Night Stalker. His real name was Richard Ramirez, and the man who taught him to kill was his own cousin. Richard Ramirez was born on February 29th, year 1960, in El Paso, Texas, the youngest of 5 children. His father, Julian, was a violent man who beat his sons. Richard suffered 2 major head injuries as a child, one from a dresser that fell on him, another from a swing that knocked him unconscious. Both left him with epileptic seizures and blinding headaches. But the real damage came from his cousin, Miguel, a Vietnam War veteran who'd served as a Green Beret. Miguel showed Richard photographs of Vietnamese women he'd raped, tortured, and killed during the war. He showed him how to sneak up on people. He taught him how to kill silently. And one day, when Richard was 13, Miguel shot his wife in the face in front of him. Richard watched her die. After that, Richard spiraled. He dropped out of school, He moved to California. He became obsessed with Satanism, heavy metal, and violence. He broke into homes to steal. And then, he started killing. His first confirmed murder was on June 28, 1984, when he stabbed 79-year-old Jenny Vinkow to death in her apartment. But the real terror began in 1985. Between March and August, Richard broke into homes across Los Angeles and San Francisco. He shot people in their beds. He raped women in front of their husbands. He gouged out eyes. He beat children. He left survivors traumatized, whispering the same thing, "Swear to Satan." He killed at least 13 people, though the true number may be higher. His victims ranged from a 6-year-old girl to an 83-year-old woman. He had no pattern, no type. He just killed. On August 30th, 1985, Richard's face was plastered on the front page of every newspaper in California. A teenager recognized him in a convenience store in East Los Angeles and shouted, "It's the Night Stalker." Richard ran. A mob of residents chased him down and beat him until police arrived. He was charged with 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 counts of sexual assault, and 14 counts of burglary. His trial was a spectacle. He flashed a pentagram drawn on his palm. He shouted, "Hail Satan," in court. He smiled at the cameras. On September 20th, 1989, he was convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to death. Richard Ramirez spent 23 years on death row. He married a woman named Doreen Leoy in 1996, one of many groupies who sent him love letters. He never showed remorse. He died of complications from B-cell lymphoma on June 7th, 2013, at the age of 53. Richard Ramirez was not born a killer. He was shaped by violence, by a father who beat him, by head injuries that damaged his brain, and by a cousin who taught him that killing was normal. And because of that, 13 people are dead, and dozens more carry the scars of his attacks. Case 9. Jeffrey Dahmer, July 22nd, 1991. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 2 police officers responded to a call about a man running down the street in handcuffs. The man, Tracy Edwards, was terrified. He told them he'd just escaped from an apartment where a man had tried to kill him. The officers followed Edwards back to the Oxford Apartments on North 25th Street. They knocked on apartment 213. A man answered. He was calm, polite, blonde. His name was Jeffrey Dahmer, and inside his apartment was a house of horrors. In the bedroom, officers found photographs, Polaroids, of dismembered bodies in various stages of decay. In the refrigerator, they found a severed head. In the freezer, more heads, hands, and genitals. In a filing cabinet, 3 more skulls. In a barrel of acid, decomposing torsos. In total, investigators found the remains of 11 men and boys. Jeffrey Dahmer had been killing, dismembering, and cannibalizing victims for over a decade. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His childhood was marked by neglect. His mother, Joyce, suffered from severe mental illness and was heavily medicated throughout her pregnancy. His father, Lionel, was a chemist who was often absent. Jeffrey was a lonely, isolated child. He collected roadkill and dissolved the bones in acid, a hobby his father encouraged as a science experiment. His parents' marriage was toxic. They fought constantly. When Jeffrey was 18, they divorced. His mother took his younger brother and left. His father moved out. Jeffrey was abandoned in an empty house with no money, no food, and no supervision. He started drinking heavily. He started fantasizing about control, about keeping people with him forever. His first murder was in 1978, just weeks after his high school graduation. He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, brought him home, and bludgeoned him to death with a dumbbell. He dismembered the body and buried it in the backyard. He didn't kill again for 9 years. But when he started, he couldn't stop. Between year 1987 and year 1991, Jeffrey murdered 16 more men, most of them young, black, and gay. He lured them to his apartment with promises of money or alcohol. He drugged them. He strangled them. He had sex with their corpses. He dismembered them. He kept their skulls as trophies. He ate their flesh. On May 27th, year 1991, a 14-year-old Laotian boy named Konarak Sinthasomphone escaped from Jeffrey's apartment, naked and bleeding. 3 women called 911. Police arrived. Jeffrey convinced them the boy was his 19-year-old boyfriend and that they'd just had a fight. The officers believed him. They escorted Konarak back into the apartment. Jeffrey killed him that night. When Jeffrey was finally arrested on July 22nd, year 1991, he confessed to everything. He showed no emotion. He said he did it because he was lonely. He wanted to keep people with him. He was charged with 15 counts of murder in Wisconsin and 1 in Ohio. He pleaded guilty, but insane. The jury found him sane. On February 17th, year 1992, he was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, 957 years in prison. Jeffrey Dahmer never made it out of prison. On November 28th, year 1994, he was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, while cleaning a prison bathroom. He was 34 years old. Jeffrey Dahmer was not born a monster. He was created by neglect, by abandonment, by parents who left him alone in a house with nothing but his darkest thoughts. And because of that, 17 young men are dead, 17 families destroyed, and a name that will forever be synonymous with evil. Case 10, Ronald DeFeo Jr., year 1974, November 13th, year 1974, Amityville, New York. A quiet suburban neighborhood on Long Island. At 3:15 in the morning, Ronald DeFeo Jr. walked through his family's home at 112 Ocean Avenue with a Marlin rifle. He went room to room. He shot his father, Ronald DeFeo Sr., in the back as he slept. He shot his mother, Louise, in the head. He shot his 2 brothers, Mark and John, ages 12 and 9. He shot his 2 sisters, Dawn and Allison, ages 18 and 13. All 6 were found lying face down in their beds. None of them had tried to run. None of them had screamed. It was as if they never woke up. At 6:30 that evening, Ronald, known as Butch, ran into a bar in Amityville and shouted, "You gotta help me. I think my mother and father are shot." Friends rushed to the house with him. They found the bodies. Police were called. Butch played the role of the devastated son. But within hours, investigators knew he was lying. His story kept changing. First, he said he came home and found them dead. Then he said a mob hitman had done it. Then he said it was a friend. Finally, he confessed. He said voices told him to do it. He said the house made him do it. He said he had no choice. Butch DeFeo had grown up in a violent home. His father was abusive, controlling, and quick to anger. Butch was the oldest son, and he bore the brunt of his father's rage. But Butch was also violent himself. He was a drug addict. He stole from his family. He'd threatened to kill them before, and on the night of November 13th, year 1974, he did. His trial began in October year 1975. The defense argued insanity. Butch claimed he heard voices. He said the house was evil. The prosecution argued it was premeditated murder, motivated by greed. Butch wanted his parents' life insurance money. The jury didn't believe the insanity defense. On November 21st, year 1975, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms, 25 years to life on each count. He spent the rest of his life in prison, bouncing between facilities in New York. He gave dozens of interviews over the years, changing his story every time. He died on March 12th, year 2021, at the age of 69, while serving his sentence at the Sullivan Correctional Facility. But the DeFeo murders didn't end with Butch's conviction. 13 months after the killings, a new family moved into 112 Ocean Avenue, George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children. They claimed the house was haunted. They said they heard voices, saw apparitions, felt evil presences. They fled after 28 days. Their story became a book, then a movie, The Amityville Horror. It became one of the most famous haunted house stories in history. But it was a lie. Investigators, journalists, and even the Lutz's lawyer later admitted the haunting was fabricated. The house wasn't haunted, it was just the site of a massacre. And the real horror wasn't ghosts. It was a 23-year-old man who murdered his entire family in cold blood. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was not insane. He was not possessed. He was a violent, angry young man who grew up in a violent, angry home. And because of him, 6 people are dead. 6 lives erased in a single night. And a house that should be remembered for tragedy became a tourist attraction built on lies. 10 cases, 10 killers. 10 families that failed them, or twisted them, or abandoned them. Some were abused, some were neglected, some were radicalized. But all of them had one thing in common. The people who were supposed to protect them didn't. And because of that, innocent people died. How many of these cases could have been prevented if someone, anyone, had intervened? If a teacher had pushed harder, if a neighbor had called the police, if a parent had chosen love over control, protection over neglect, we'll never know. But we do know this: monsters are not born, they are made. And the people who make them are often the ones closest to them. Thanks for sticking with me through these heavy cases. If you learned something new or gained a deeper understanding, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into true crime. And tell me, which case shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments.